What's going on, guys? And I have an important announcement. As you guys have seen on Facebook, the Warcry Podcast now has a merch store through Redbubble. What you'll do is you'll hit that link below, select the logo that you like. You know, we got a wolf logo, we got that Bigfoot scratch or the Dogman scratch logo. Once you select the logo, you'll go down and hit your styles. If you want a t-shirt, if you want a sweatshirt, or if you want different things, or a sticker or whatever, you'll select the color of that, and then your size, and then you hit that checkout button. And hitting that checkout button and getting that t-shirt supports the podcast. And I appreciate everyone that listens, and it's amazing, and I do truly appreciate it. But with that said, let's get to the episode. So run me my music. It's very, very dangerous.
Get these spidey sense, I was like, oh, something's off.
And I'm just like, man, I'm waiting to hear something,
Keep that crowd warmed up. There's Mr. Jehovah Tiger.
What's going on, guys, and welcome to the 1 year anniversary podcast for the Warcry Podcast. And I told you guys I was going to be bringing you a compilation of all the This Is Creepy podcast and episodes. It's a 2-hour long episode. I didn't think I was saying like an hour and a half maybe, but there's actually a lot of stuff on there. And before we get to the compilation, I just wanted to say to everybody that I appreciate it's kind of hard to say this, but not really hard to say this, but it's hard to put it in words, the amount of appreciation I have for everyone that's listened to the podcast. This has been a year. I wanted to shout out Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation / Spirit Talkers. That podcast is, man, there's no podcast better than that one. And I appreciate those guys, Russell Sun Eagle, Chris Honka Hill, and Tyler Double Deuce Randall. I appreciate those guys, and they gave me a little bit of courage to do my own thing too as well. I know you got Okie Podcast with Russell, you have Spooky Stories from Indian Country with Chris on Facebook, and you got Skoden Cinema, and then you got Pump Action Podcast with Tyler Randall. So shout out to you guys. Shout out to different people who have shared the podcast and continued to support. I can't say it enough. And don't forget that merch store, y'all. It's going to be in the link. The link is going to be in the bio. Without further ado, this is Creepy Compilation. So I had been kind of, asking around, so I moved. Everybody knows that. Episode 11. I think it's episode 11. Anyways, yeah, Bob Ross episode. So I moved, and so I've been trying to kind of find my way in the community, and I'm starting to ask questions about things, and just want to know some things because I'm curious by nature. And I was talking to somebody, and we got on the topic of like demons, and the story that they told me. I've heard this type of story before, but to me, this one's kind of this one's pretty crazy. So he had been this person had been kind of an atheist their entire life, didn't really believe nothing, and he kind of goes through some tribulations and some things that happens in his life, and he ends up finding a higher power, and he cannot control the excitement. So he's telling his coworkers and his employees and people around him basically just cannot contain it. How excited he is, and he goes and starts telling everybody, and one of the last people he tells is somebody who he thought he was kind of close with, and so he's telling the story of how he got here, and he looked over, and the guy that he was telling the story to had this weird kind of grin, and it was almost like that type of grin where you almost don't believe him, but he said it didn't look like a normal grin. The facial features were exaggerated. And he keeps talking, he keeps looking over, and he starts to notice that this guy's face, who he'd been working with for years, started to morph.
and he didn't recognize him. But it was him. It was the guy. But the facial features did not look like him. And he said that he noticed that his voice started to change as well. And he was kind of like, man, this is, in his head, he's like, man, he's talking and he's like, man, this is kind of crazy. Like, what's going on? So then he ends up, kind of in the name of Jesus, and basically, at a certain point, this guy doesn't look like anything like his guy his coworker, and so he says, in the name of Jesus, you tell me your name. And the guy that's that's kind of weird, like his face is changing and stuff, says in this like kind of this raspy, otherworldly voice, and said skepticism. And I thought that was crazy. I was like, what? And the guy that's telling me the story, he's like, man, I couldn't quite put into words what happened, like what I saw and heard. So once he did that, he said this, whatever this thing is, says skepticism, and then the guy that I guess it's using him slumps in the chair and closes his eyes and looks down, and then looks back up, and he's like normal again. And the guy that's telling me the story said, hey man, are you all right? And the guy's like, no. He's like, I don't even know where I'm at. What am I doing in your office? Like, what's going on? Like, I don't even know. So he's so confused and scared, he like runs out of the office and like is trying to like grasp like where he was at, because like last thing he remembered, he was somewhere else in the facility. And he comes back, he's like, man, I don't know what happened. What were we talking about? And so I kind of, with that story, I always thought it was kind of interesting, because I had, as you just knows, I always ask people, questions and stories, and a story that was told to me by somebody who I never deemed to be paranormal or that type of way. And this story was told to me about 6 years ago. And it's something similar to that story that I just told you guys. And basically this person was telling me this story about how their parent or their mom was in this like exorcist group. And they prayed over people who they thought had a demon in them. And you hear that and you're like, dang, that's all right. This is crazy. But I thought it was, I believe in that thing. I believe in these things. And so one day they prayed over somebody, and the next day they were going to church. And everybody's kind of, normal church stuff going on. Well, this old man, real like old looking man, walks in the middle of church right down to the front aisle, to the front pew. And they said, and people around said he stunk like death. He just smelled so bad. And they said that he kept during the sermon, amen, brother, being real sarcastic and, kind of being real, obnoxious, and just, amen, like just trying to make fun, of that thing, of that, the people that do that. And come to find out, once the sermon's over, they all go to classes, and this old man goes in this classroom with the person that's telling me this story. And they noticed that their parent, their mom, was in the classroom with them, and she could hear, and like she was back there, in the back of the room with this old man was here, and you could hear faint whispering. It was like, and you could hear it, but it was almost like a prayer. And what they come to find out is that the mom was saying a prayer over the room, the classroom. All of a sudden, the lights go out, and this old stinking man, smelled like death. The lights go down, and the lights come back on, and he's gone. So I always asked about that. So, have you ever seen him again? They're like, no, we haven't. But what they think it was is that spirit that they had kind of exorcised out of this person that they did that previous day followed them to church and was trying to make a mockery of what they were doing. And so, yeah, that story right there gives me goosebumps. I think I've maybe told that a few times. I haven't really been public with that one, but I'd share it on here. But, I just found that conversation so interesting. I know we kind of went on a deep dive with investigations on Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation. We talked about kind of investigations that Chris and I have done over our lives. Obviously, Chris has been all over the place. Mine's kind of more local, but all these, all these kind of happen in small towns, which is kind of interesting about that too as well. But, I've had so many stories told to me over the course of the last probably year. And some of them I haven't gotten to, in which I'm going to touch base on some of those today. First story that was told to me. Was told to me a couple months ago, and I want to read it verbatim because one thing I don't want to do is mess my story up, especially when I haven't really, I know the story. I just don't want to mess up the small details because that's kind of what makes this story. So this story came in, like I said, a little bit ago. But so when I was younger, my folks fought a lot. My mom had side pieces, other men on the side. My dad went to a Cherokee medicine man. I don't know who, and my mom was telling me about this later on. Well, in the fridge, she found a bottle hidden down in the vegetable drawer under, a bunch of the food. And the person goes, I guess he thought that our fat chibs wouldn't find it in there. Dang, I know, I'll be scouring the fridge, just making sure, no stone goes unturned when it comes to food. Nah, but... But anyway, whatever it looked like, she recognized it as medicine. Right away, and the mother confronted him. He admitted it, and he said, "Yeah, I did do that, and I changed my mind on it, and so I stopped using it." Well, I guess he was supposed to drink that potion of whatever of the medicine that he had put on him. He was supposed to drink it when he was done with it. Well, he drinks it, and he has this crazy dream that he's standing by a trading post back in the old days. And some old Indian man is standing there, and he's selling stuff. He said basically all around him was almost like how it was in the old days. Like there was no paved roads. It was all everything was still like how it was back in the old days. And it's almost like, I guess they equate it to being like a VCR, like when you rewind, you can rewind back in time. That's kind of what happened. Well, he said the area used to be a lake in his dream, the Indian man. And so he went wading in the water that was there. And he started to notice invisible hands starting to grab him and pull him down into the lake. And so some time goes by. They're all sitting next to the TV watching those old PBS, OETA type program. And there was something about Cherokee, a woman that was on there that's talking about the people who live in the lake. And they was all sitting there and they was like, dang, he just had a dream about the people in the lake. Yeah, I always wondered that too. If it's old ways trying to tell you something or higher power trying to tell you something. But, they end up kind of like, dang, that's crazy. There's a kind of a connection. But, we've talked about dreams before, especially on live streams, on TikTok Live. And I believe dreams, I think people can see into the future and they can see in the past. But I don't think we know what we're looking at. I had a conversation with the same person with the first story I told. We were talking what if we dream and we dream so far ahead that we don't know where we're at because we've never been there before. And so what we're seeing is essentially not really what it is, but it's the future. And we don't know what that place looks like. And maybe that's what we see is the future, but it's not how it really is because we haven't been there before. That's a good thought, but I appreciate that story. And if you know anything about the people that live in the lake, I've heard something about that in Ten Killer, a little bit about that out in Ten Killer Lake. But if you know anything about that and you heard that story and you're like, man, I think I know what you're talking about, definitely shoot me a message on Facebook or email me. My email is also on the War Cry podcast page, which I just made. But yeah, go message me. And if you know anything about that, that'd be real interesting to know if anyone has any more stories about that. But that's one thing I love about people sending me stories. It gets me thinking about things, such as the dreams and things like that. So the next story I'm going to tell, this involves, and I know I've promoted this on Facebook, but it's about three green orbs. And this is told by my cousin. And I don't think I'm going to share his name, even though he gave me full permission, but you never know. You truly never know. I don't want to shame anybody out, but so this story happened in 2012. He writes, I was living in Prosper, Texas, and was walking to my room, which was converted from a garage. And as soon as I opened the door, there were the three green orbs floating about waist high in the middle of the room. When I walked into my room, they started spinning in a circle and then flew through the roof and disappeared. Nobody else saw it. My mom was in the kitchen, which is connected to the room, and never saw any lights or any shadows from it. So fast forward about 4 years later, he's living with his grandma. And he said that they had some crazy stuff going on in the house. Well, she used to get real bad nightmares, and would wake up screaming sometimes. She said she woke up once and there was this man sitting on her bed, and she could feel the indentation of that thing sitting on her bed. She saw a lot of shadowy figures in that time, and she always thought it was her husband coming back to see her, coming back to visit. But the more he thought about it, the shadow man would not cause us the pain that they had to go through, or the torment, or the feeling scared. And about a week or so after one of these dreams she ended up picking up a piece of metal out of her sandwich, which is kind of strange. And it was in the slice of bread was a wire. It turns out that she was given a bag at a powwow somewhere. It was filled with bad medicine. She had no idea who gave it to her and thinks it was slipped into her purse. So then they contacted our uncle, and it's my uncle too, because obviously we're cousins. But he told us what we needed to do, and that he was going to come over and smoke the house. During this time, my cousin had been having problems of his own. He really never told nobody about it, but he was having bad dreams too, and he was feeling real uneasy, feeling about the closet that was in that room. So our uncle comes over and prays and smokes tobacco all over the house. And when he gets done, he comes up to us and says that my closet was filled with these demons trying to come through a portal. He freaked out because I was like, nobody knew anything. No one said anything. He never said nothing. But after he was finished, it was gone, and there wasn't any more issues after that. Man, that's a great story. That's when it comes to those medicine bags. I was always told never to, if you're not from that area, or you're not from those people or from that group, you never really take that. And some people can take that as a sign of disrespect, but this is what happens. Is let's say you come and people think you're moving in a way that's not correct. With who they are, or the way they do things. That people could do that to you. And I was always told that growing up. If you ever go somewhere and you're unfamiliar with the place, you just kind of keep it moving, and you just kind of keep moving in the direction you're going, and just say decline whatever you got to do, because you just never know what people are trying to do to you, or anything like that. But like I said, that's a great story, and I appreciate him telling that. And he had a Hat Man story, but I think I told that on Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation. Basically, I had told a story at what was it? Hominy, I think. Yeah, Hominy. Dang, man, Hominy was so hot too. I don't know how I kind of got that story logical, but I had a story that basically I saw Hat Man right before I was supposed to graduate, and he had been seeing that same kind of entity and being as well. And so, anyways, the next story I'm going to tell you guys, this also comes from my same cousin, or not the same cousin, same side of the family, and a different cousin, my Kiowa and Creek cousin. So there's a church that that all of our relatives in Eufaula had been going to for a long time, and this story kind of really struck me because I was always told growing up, you either choose the grounds or medicine, things like that, traditional or tradish, or you go church route, and you're not supposed to mix those things. And this story, like I said, this story comes from her mother. So back in the day, I guess you could say, they were making their, they were leaving, and they forgot something. The mother or so it'd be our great grandmother forgot something at the church. They had church service that evening, and my aunt was like, "Oh, we'll go back and get it for you. No problem. We'll go back and get it." Well, they pull up to the church, and she opens the door, and down by the pulpit, when this church isn't very long, but it's an old church, and now it's it'd be kind of newer back in the day, but at the end of the pulpit, she noticed there was a black figure, and there was somebody sitting in the chair next to the pulpit. And as she looked closer, that chair, that black figure had that person levitating. And when I heard that, to finish the story, she ended up backing out and getting out of there. And she told the story years later. But, one thing that's kind of crazy about that, is those things, there are people out there that have done those things. And I mean no disrespect to those people because they're still around. But, I have another family member whose grandpa would float to church. They'd say, hey, man, you need a ride to church? We want to make sure you get there all right. And he said, nah, I'm all right. And next thing you know, he beat him to the church. Those things are still out there. It's not as prevalent today as it used to be. I think because everybody's got their camera phone out now. Everybody, if you saw someone kind of floating by, not even walking, just floating by fast like, you'd be kind of like, oh, dang, I got to get a picture of that or a video of that. And that might be why we don't see that anymore. But, that's kind of crazy. It's a crazy story because, you just truly never know, what's out there and, who's doing what. But that's one thing that we always want to make sure that I do is respect those people and those people that do things and know things. I got a good laugh out of a TikTok comment one time was, y'all are practicing bad medicine. It's like, dang, I don't even know. I was like, dang, I don't know nothing like that. I know of them, I don't know about them. And I think that's one thing that, I always try to make sure that I do respect is those people that do those things. Don't come see me. I respect you. Nah. But this episode, to me is a very good one because, like I said, it gets me thinking. Gets me thinking of different topics and different types of ideas to do with the podcast. And it also gives other people too. Like people say, "Oh man, I heard that story about that." It gives people an idea of being like, "Oh, let me tell you the story about this." And I always try to get it as close to the story as they told me as humanly possible. And if you hear this, family members or whoever, I try to read it verbatim. Sometimes I like to add a little spice to it, but it's not. The story is true, and I believe anyone that does send me stories because these things are out there, and and we want to make sure we respect them. But that's all I got for you guys today. I got like I said, threw out some stories out there. Like I said, if you're kind of a little scaredy cat, I'd listen to it during the daytime. I do want to say this too as well. Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation. We are looking for high school or college stories, dormitory stories. Haskell, IAIA, Bacone, Northeastern State University, OU, Oklahoma State. We're looking for all stories. Sequoia dorms, Riverside, all these different schools. Fort Lewis. We are looking for stories. So if you hear this and you have a story from those schools, send me a message. We can keep you anonymous. I believe we are recording at the end of this month. And so we're going to do a college edition. So I want to make sure that story is told because we're losing a lot of those, we're losing a lot of those old Sequoia dorm stories. My grandma, I wish I had asked her more about her days there. Maybe I'll have to ask my dad, but I remember she told one story one time about a girl who committed suicide, but I can't remember the full story on why she did and what led to that or what she did, if it haunted the place. But I do have a pretty wicked story from somebody who went to Sequoia back in the old days, probably 70s. Man, it's wicked. It's a wicked story. So I can't wait to share that one, and I can't wait to share ones that are told to me. Shooting, if you got any Woodall Wildcat, Briggs, 10 Killer Schools, I'm trying to think of who else, Pegs, Kenwood, all those schools. Yeah, if you know something from those schools, like I said, shoot me a message.
This story is about a time when I was a dialysis technician working at a clinic in Midwest City. I had a friend that I actually went to school with and grew up with that was a patient at this clinic I worked at. He was a real good guy. Me and him would always talk and have a good time, just try to make the treatment go a little easier. Well, this particular day, one of my coworkers, I don't think I'm gonna name any names, but one of my coworkers, a young lady, she was the one that connected him to the dialysis machine and got him started on his treatment. She goes to break, and I'm kind of monitoring her patients and my patients because, we're on the same side of the room. So after about, maybe 5 minutes of my friend that I grew up with on this machine doing his treatment, he kind of starts yelling my name and, is hollering for me to come over there to him because he doesn't feel right. So I go over to him and I'm checking, settings on the machine. I'm just, kind of going over everything, making sure everything is done properly. So as I'm doing all that, he keeps telling me he feels like something is standing on his chest or something is choking him. Typically, when you have that happen, that's a sign of the machines just pulling, the excess fluid off your body a little too hard and you need to back it off. But, his machine wasn't really set that high, in my opinion. Plus, he hadn't been on there long enough to have a problem. So I'm sitting there talking to him, trying to, figure out what's going on. And all of a sudden, I feel like this push in my back. And I look around and there's nobody around me. And I get pushed again. And I look around and I'm like, what the hell? There's nothing around me. And it was a push. I mean, like I could feel hands pushing me. Freaked me out. So when this happens, my buddy, his head's back. His eyes are kind of rolled back in his head. He's talking in tongues. And I'm sitting there looking dumbfounded. And I look across the room and I see like a little, probably 4 foot tall, kind of clear, see-through looking entity running out of the front door to the clinic. When it runs out the door, my manager comes out and she immediately says, "Hey, is everything okay? Something ain't right." And I'm still sitting here looking crazy. And shortly after, my phone in my pocket goes off and it's my pastor, and he calls and leaves a message saying, "Hey man, I felt in my spirit, that I needed to pray for you." And he did like a little prayer on the message or whatever and, left it at that. And I tell you what, that really messed me up. I was kind of into church back then, and I was one of the kind of people that always wanted to read about spiritual warfare and stuff like that. So it was very interesting, but I tell you what, I got some holy oil and prayed on it. And the next day I came in, man, I was putting oil on coffee pots and door handles and people's lockers. And that particular person that put him on that machine that day, she didn't like it too much. It kind of offended her. She was in a real rare, mood when she came in that next morning. I guess whatever I did worked. Plus I had some of the old timers that were real into church, they all were kind of praying and, doing things spiritually like that. And that's probably one of the wildest stories I've ever encountered, ever had as far as my encounters go. I've got a couple more I may share with you sometime. Talk to you again, man. Appreciate you.
Man, wow. That's one thing about, this this series, man. You just get some stories who, kind of unexplained, but AJ, I appreciate him sharing his stories. He has shared a few other stories with me as well, and I'm going to share those too. He didn't voice record it, but he said that one was kind of a longer story, but I appreciate people that send in their stories. That to me, that's like the coolest thing ever, because you hear things like that. The 4 foot tall kind of, I would say, humanoid type, entity or being, and that's one thing that's just kind of crazy. But I appreciate him sharing his story, and I'm going to share a few more from him. And so, one thing that he had brought up, it's an idea, but there's this, I wouldn't say constant battle, but I would say there is some type of sort of separation of medicine or native magic in church. And he asked me to kind of speak on this, and I'm by no means an expert in this because I don't practice, but one thing that's always been said, and I've talked to some church people who are I'd say, on more of, like, I guess more of the, the side of church, or, more church, and they believe in these things, but they're like really hardcore church going people. And I've talked to different people from, different ethnicities when it comes to that. And I've spoken with some Hispanic people who believe, when they talk about their witches and their things like that, they get real kind of spooked about that. But one thing that mixing those things can cause, any type of, and I'm trying to be careful. I'm trying to be careful saying, but they can cause things to go the other way or not be exactly as you intended when you're doing those things. But I had a family member who their grandpa did both, and they'd always tell stories about kind of laughing about it that he always got to places quicker than them, and they were in a car, and he was like, they'd be, hey, let me get you a ride, it's get you there quick, we're leaving early, and he'd go, nah, I'm all right, and they'd get their way, get going to the church, and he's already there. He had no car, so those things are out there, and I'm always real respectful of those things, but I know that there can be some consequences or things done to those that mix those things. And I was talking to a guy who's a non-native, and he was talking about like the new age witchcraft that's going on in certain areas, and he said that's a constant battle with that because people want instant gratification on things that are supposed to become naturally, or they're supposed to become like, I want to say animal world, but like animal world, like survival of the fittest. But things are supposed to happen how they're supposed to happen in terms of biology and things like that. And this stuff is these new age type of magic, or I don't know really what it's called, but the Russian processes in life. And I thought it was pretty interesting. Getting that point of view from someone who's a non-native, but there's those things out there that people use, and I just thought it was really interesting. So hopefully, AJ, that addresses your, kind of me talking about that just a little bit. So next story I'm going to tell you about comes out of kind of the Clearview area, and this is from AJ as well. And his email goes, I have a cousin that moved from Oklahoma City to Clearview, and this was back in the late 90s. He moved into an area the locals called the Bottoms. He says that Bigfoot was always lurking around, messing with his animals, and so he decided to shoot it. And I can't remember, in the email, so he can't remember exactly what the caliber he used to shoot that his cousin used to shoot this Bigfoot. But he said it went down screaming and crazy and took off into the woods and just went crazy in the woods. But he said later that night it came back and tore up the barn, fence, and his kid's swing set. He said he twisted the legs. He basically, this thing just went crazy all over their property and their stuff. It really messed with his cousin. But he said that no one around him believed Bigfoot would tore up his property, and so he moved away into the town of Clearview, and he really swore it happened. So, we always hear that in different communities in the Bigfoot community. I know like there's a lot of people that say if you shoot these things, they will come back with a vengeance if you don't kill it. But one thing that I've heard just in, like I said, the community that people always talking about is these things don't come in ones. They don't come like by themselves. It's always like kind of in a family group, or I don't really know what I would call it. But they do come back, and they do have kind of emotions, and that goes back to kind of talking about Bigfoot being kind of a clan or a tribe. They don't run in ones. So that's a really interesting story that his cousin shot that. And next story that he has for us is, and this comes from his grandfather. So his grandfather passed away in the house, and all the pictures on the walls would always turn sideways. And he said you could hear footsteps running across the roof, but no one was found on the roof or outside the house. We'd always straighten all the pictures back to normal, and they turned sideways again.
Another cousin said that they were on the back porch standing, by a well that was on the property, and they seen this massive owl flying through the night sky right towards them. As it got closer, it just disappeared right in front of her. The back of the house was kind of high off the ground, and there was an underground stream that ran under the property and, had some of the best water you could ever drink. Well, the well had a really long chain on a bucket that went really deep down, about 15 to 20 feet down. So you can imagine how high, his cousin, was on that back porch when she saw that owl. Another time, another cousin was on the back porch, and this old car came barreling through the woods towards the back of the house, and when it got close, it just disappeared. There was an old burial ground literally down the street from his grandparents' house. My mom told me a story of how they were always told to be home by dark. One night when they were late getting in, they'd walk past the burial ground and they were chased by what they were called the Hanks. And I know, skilly, things like that, I think is kind of, but she said they ran so fast, and I guess he said that the Hanks is kind of what they kind of call it, but I think he misspelled it here. But anyways, but they're called Hanks, or skilly, or honka, or however your people they just decide to call it. Last story here from AJ. When his grandfather, like I said, he was told when his grandfather had passed, an old mangy-looking dog showed up, and it wouldn't leave. So one of the cousins grabbed a shotgun and shot it. They said it was hit with buckshot, went down like it was dead, and then got up and walked around the house like nothing happened. They said that it was bloody and couldn't understand how it survived. They claimed that the same mangy dog kept coming around and was shot 3 more times at close range. It wouldn't die. After a while, they never saw it again and never knew why it wouldn't die. But they thought they wouldn't call it a spirit, but they also didn't like talking about those things. Man, those are some pretty good stories from AJ, and I appreciate him sharing those. A similar story that I've told in the past, when it comes to those types of, when you got a relative pass, or, someone that, families, going to pass, you always get visits from things. And, I've heard stories of, getting a phone call from a relative who had already passed, but they're calling you to let you know that they're going to be all right. And, to me, those are, to kind of reference another podcast, but Res Scares, Dono, he shared a story, like I said, I mentioned on a prior episode, but that's what that reminds me of, those sweet scares, those nice scares, and so I appreciate AJ sharing those stories. Man, those are some pretty good stories there. Next story I got for you guys. So this comes out of Garfield County, Oklahoma, in the late 70s. And this was sent to me, and I think she wanted to remain anonymous. But this story was sent, like I said, in the 70s when she was 10 years old. So one night, her and her siblings were walking down a railroad track gravel part of the railroad track. And they had been walking there for quite a while, and they're kind of making their way down. And after a few minutes, they started hearing footsteps, like that gravel type footstep kind of. And she suddenly turned around and looked, and there was nothing there. And she looked all the way down, all the way down the track, and couldn't see anything. Kept going, and eventually she thought that she saw a tall, dark, shadow type man that was dashing behind the trees, following him. And she looked several times back, thinking it was a man that was, messing with them or kind of, but the dark shadow kept peeking out from behind, a tree that was next to the railroad track behind them. And so they would walk, and then after a few minutes, they'd stop and they'd hear those footsteps again. And she writes, these were unmistakable footsteps, and saw nothing. Quoted as saying, basically one of the most terrifying, experiences she's had, because literally, she was thinking it was a part of her imagination. As being a little kid, always kind of thinking that you have, you think you see something when may not be something, but a couple hundred feet down, like I said, they heard those footsteps, behind them, and they stopped, and they literally, how it was described is they would literally take those steps, purposely walking, and then stop, and then it would still kind of, you'd hear it, taking additional steps. And by that time, it was over. It was right behind them, and they looked, and there was nothing there. They ended up running home scared. But I appreciate you sharing that story. That's one thing. You always have parents always saying, "You better get home before dark." You don't know what's going to be out there, and that's a pretty good example of that. And that's a great story because you don't really know what it was, and it might have been a shadow person, or could have been a Bigfoot, or. But I appreciate you sharing that story, and we're moving on to the next one. Wow, the shadow people, you really truly never know, what it could have been. But that's real. I appreciate that person sharing that story to me, especially. I don't really hear anything out of Garfield County. I honestly don't even know where that's at. I'm thinking about it as I'm looking at kind of the map. I'm like, man, that's kind of a place I've never been before. But so I appreciate that story. So this next story that I'm going to tell, has been partially shared, I believe. Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation. I was going to share this story on there. I think we had some issues or technical issues, and it was a mess. And so I don't think this story has ever been publicly told. But this story comes out of Jones area. And this person is Kickapoo, and so basically it was taken between Jones and Hara along the North Canadian River. And this is I'm going to tell exactly how this person told it to me, and so here we go. In July 2019, two friends and I decided to go ghost hunting. We were just bored, so I left Norman, picked my friends up in Tecumseh, and headed towards Jones. One of my friends grew up out there, and had a lot of ghost stories, sightings, and all types of things going on. Nothing happened. Side note: we were parked by the school where the boy. So I guess the side note is there was a documentary that came out that I had mentioned about the girl in the picture, and it has some locations here in Oklahoma. Well, they had parked next to the school where this boy was kidnapped, and I cannot for the life of me. I think it's in Jones, but I can't remember the name of that school. Anyways, but her friend remembers the kid going missing, and that when they grew up out there, there was this old brick building that they said that a witch lived in there. But she said she was stealing the kids, which is kind of interesting. But anyways, so nothing happened out there. So they drove further down the dirt road because they were so close to the river. And her friend asked if we wanted to go down there. And, of course they did. So we parked the car and ended up walking through the trees and grass. It was summertime, and I remember it was such a nice night, full moon, and there wasn't really a breeze that I could remember while we were walking down to the river. When we got closer to the river, I walked down from my friends just to enjoy the night and the sounds. Out of nowhere, one of my friends then yells at us to come look. She had her phone flashlight on and was looking at the sand. I thought she was going to show us a dead fish or something, but it was a crazy looking print. At first, I thought she made the print, and then I thought maybe somebody was down here before, jumped down, and made like a sliding print to make a big print. But I remember the first print was odd looking. Behind the hill, it had imprints of what I now believe was wet hair dragging. I don't know how else to describe it. It just looked odd. Then she walked closer up to the actual river, and she found another one. This time of the other foot, it was more prominent. You could actually see the toes and the outline of the print, and it was so clear. My friend, who wore men's 13, put his foot against the print, and his foot looked so small compared to this print. It looked like this thing had walked straight into the water, probably crossed the water, but the bugs were making so much noise, so I don't think he was anywhere near us. And that's one thing they say too, is like when Sasquatch is around, or Bigfoot, the entire everything goes quiet because the apex predator's there. So that's interesting. So my friend and I are looking at the print, and we start taking pictures of it. One of my friends swipes his finger in the print. We freak out and ask, "What are you doing?" He said, "I don't know. I just see I just see how they do it in the shows." When he lifted his finger from the print, she had our flashlights on his finger, and there was reddish, like strands of reddish hair. He quickly dusted his hands off, and we decided it was time to get out of there. We climb up out of the riverbank and start making our way back to the road, to the car. Our guy friend was out in front, and my friend and I were in the back. I remember hearing voices / murmuring, and I didn't think much of it since there was houses, out there. It was almost 5 a.m., so I thought people were leaving for work. As soon as I thought these thoughts, my friend comes up behind me and grabs me and whispers frantically, "Go, go, 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 go. There's something behind me. Don't look, just go." And of course, I had to look at my side, and there was something in the grass moving. She said something had gone behind her, so we stopped walking. My other friend just kept walking along like nothing. My friend and I just stopped because these things were in the grass, running and hopping. At first, I thought these were rabbits, but then they stood up and started running. Man, I was gonna freak out because I knew what I was looking at. LP. Ooh, I got goosebumps after that. Golly. So they get just far enough away from us, and that my friend and I start walking. We see them run across the road in front of our other friend. Then both of us make our way back to the car, and the other friend is walking around the car inspecting it. We left drinks and had our windows down, and I kept watching these things running across the field into the dark. Man, I was terrified. We got out of the area and didn't talk about it until we got back into the lights of Shawnee. Turns out our friend didn't even see, the male friend didn't even see the LPs running by him. I always wondered what that was about. For a long time, I wondered why we saw that and why there. The location we were at is actually a place where we do a lot of our ceremonies and have dances. So there's a lot of energy around there. I don't know if we disturbed it that night or what. I started to feel bad, like we did something wrong. So, pretty sure I mentioned before the issue. So the issues. So I had talked to this person, and we had talked about how they took pictures, and basically the phone that she took pictures with disappeared for like years. And she was always, she joked around that basically the Men in Black took my phone, or maybe it was the LPs, and that we were, for whatever reason. But she hadn't really told a lot of people about, that happened. But it's very strange. Then one day she went and looked at it, or went and looked in the drawer that it was supposed to be in, and it was there. So that's a pretty wicked story, I got goosebumps in the middle of that. I had to stop, obviously you guys heard that, but like, man, that's to me one of my favorite stories I've heard, and it's pretty wicked because, I asked later on kind of, what it looked like, and she said that she honestly thought it was a rabbit. My logical brain said rabbit, and they were hopping and stood up, and they took off on two legs, and then when they crossed the pavement, I focused my eyes to try to get a better look, and they were definitely on two legs. I even asked the other ones if there's any small critters that ran on 2 feet. And I asked basically how high or how tall, and they said 2 to 3 feet. And then she, more background to the story, where that's at, is located right off that river. There's a lot of houses around this place too. So that's a pretty crazy story, and I appreciate this person, sharing this story, because that's for them to go to see, basically Bigfoot hairs, reddish Bigfoot hairs, to then see an LP. Man, you must have been out there wilding out, had all the spirits, going crazy. But I appreciate you telling that story. That's a great story. I really do appreciate it. Man, we've had some pretty wicked stories told. Like I said, I've been kind of people have been kind of sharing these stories, and man, that's just, they got some great stories, and I appreciate everyone that shared. But we're not done yet. We're not done. So you guys started hearing, I appreciate you. When you hear appreciate for me, I'm trying to get out the conversation. I'm trying to leave. I'm trying to get out of here. But we're not done yet. Got a few more to go. Okay, and I appreciate everybody that's been hanging on, because this next one happened back in 2003. Back in 2003, when my son was about 3 or 4 months old, my mom and my cousin was babysitting for me. My room was one of the back bedrooms, and the crib was there with the baby monitor. And then we had the other monitor in the living room. Well, my mom had put my son in the crib to sleep. Well, it wasn't long after my mom had laid my son down when both her and my cousin hear what it sounded like an old lady talking directly into the baby monitor, which was on top of the corner next to my son's head. It was whispering, but she couldn't make out what she was saying. So she freaked out, ran back into the room, and there was no one there. She was freaked out and grabbed my son. When I got home, he was laying next to her when she was sitting on the couch. She told me what happened, and we never let my son sleep alone or kept him in the back room alone after that. The crazy part is sometime later, my mom had seen an old native woman walk into their closet when they were sleeping. My mom didn't know if it was real or if she was dreaming. Man, that's crazy. Man, yeah, when it comes to them kids, man, it's always got to make sure we protect them. But I asked this question, I've asked it kind of in private, but why do ghosts always be hanging out in closets? Like, they just be hanging out just for no reason, just, scaring everybody, making everybody scared. But man, I appreciate that story, man. Like a lot of these stories, they're giving me goosebumps, and I hope it's giving you goosebumps too. And like I said, we're not done. There's plenty more to go. On to the next one. This next story, it comes from the Cherokee Nation Res, and this story was told by Mr. Jared Davis. Jared, he's been featured on OCO TV. I would call him world famous with the hog meat. He'd be frying that hog meat up. But he's told me 2 stories that I thought were really, really kind of creepy. And so one night he was playing marbles with an older gentleman and himself. And it was him and an older gentleman, and they were playing. And there was a few other people playing too, it seems like. But they tried to hit this marble to keep him from winning. And they both missed. And their marbles went on, towards the road in the directions of the school, of the Owens School. And as they were headed, to get their marbles, they both at the same time simultaneously looked at the school and seen a black figure standing in the window, and it slowly turned away to go back in. We both turned to each other and asked, "Did you see that?" Afterwards, I faced my vehicle to the school, and one of the guys walked over to the building and looked in and said, "No, there ain't nothing in there. Doors were locked." But he's playing marbles at all times of the night, sound like. Be out there in the dark with the skillies. That's what he'd be doing. But he also told this other story I thought was kind of crazy too. So one night he was playing real late into the night, and everybody that was playing said that they saw a 3-foot owl standing by hole 5 just watching them play real late at night. I asked him, I said, y'all must have had I basically told him, might have had a good game going, And, one thing about these 3-foot owls, these tall owls, is they try to steal your marbles, your Cherokee marbles strategy. No. But he said it was dark colored, and it just basically, he walked towards it, and it turned around and started walking away, and then finally it flew. And then this dude's crazy, he tried to catch it. But, he's had multiple, he has heard, stories over the years of people trying to catch these shifters or these things that, can do these things, or the people that can do these things while they're dreaming. And I thought that was pretty interesting because, I believe in, kind of that lucid dreaming. But, every time that, they try to get a hold of it, basically, until the lights turned on, they wake up after the struggle and with only feathers in their hands. And so that's pretty crazy. I appreciate him sharing those 2 stories. They're pretty quick stories, but I know he's got more, and I'm waiting on him because I know he's got some family members who worked over there at the Heritage Center. So I appreciate Jared you sharing those two stories. Man, those are be playing marbles at night, man. We getting took. Nah. This next story comes out of the Ozarks, out in Missouri. This story was sent to me. Like I said, I'm going to keep this person anonymous. A lot of these people, like I said, that's one thing about this. You can remain anonymous. The stories are going to be the stories. So I appreciate this person sharing the story. So, my family has had a cabin in the Ozarks in Missouri for a long time, and I would spend weeks down there with my grandparents. When I was about 5, I was picking blueberries along a path. It was only about 50 feet from the cabin, but I noticed something moving uphill. It was behind a tree, but it kind of stuck out on both sides, and it was really hairy. The face was human, but with bushy eyebrows, but not really any other hair that I could see. The skin was basically like a sun, kind of a bronze brown type of skin. I think when I walked to another tree, it blocked its view, and it was trying to see what I was up to. If it didn't keep moving, its head and shoulders from one side if it didn't keep moving its head and shoulders from one side of the tree to the other, I don't think I would have noticed it. I went to the other side of the path and got behind a really big oak tree and then peeked out at it. My grandma called me, and when I looked back, it was gone. A lot of the property was surrounded by a lot of extended family, and often they invited their friends to hunt. It was unusual because no one should be near the cabins. Some of the guys had some really strange hunting outfits, so I just had to put it down as it being a hunter, since I saw it had hands. About a week or two later, my mom's cousin was on the hill playing horsey with his toddler, or was playing horsey with his toddler on his shoulders, and he was about 6'8" to 6'7", so he was a tall dude, and went by the spot where this thing was. He would have needed at least another toddler on top of his head to come close to how tall the creature was. I used to run around the woods there and return when my grandmother called me. Once she was in town 15 miles away, and I even heard her call me after she had passed. Kind of funny that it was probably a Bigfoot, because my ventures were always looking for billy goats that had died out in the late 40s to early 50s in that area. Had other strange things go on. My grandpa would take us kids to the river to tire us out, and we would play for hours on the gravel bar. Once we had been out there early in the day and came back after lunch to find a large tree sticking out into the water where we had been playing. It had a huge chunk of concrete on it, and where we went to look, there was a doe pinned under the trunk, so it was submerged. No concrete for hundreds of feet. And that was part of a low water bridge. Also, the island gravel bar was all scrub brush. So I had no idea how big the tree got there, or how that big tree got there. But my grandpa had us leave right away. My uncle also had some property several miles down the road, and I would mow the fence line in the orchard on a small riding lawnmower, while my grandpa would go around digging out any thistles so the rest of the field could be brush hogged. It was supposed to be over 100 or so that day, and so we got early start around daybreak. I kept getting hit by acorns and pine cones, and just figured out he was messing with me. But I saw him in the middle of the road, or I saw him in the middle of the field, and this was in the middle of nowhere, so you had to cross several cattle gates and 2 long fences to get to where I was. No pine trees in that area, so no idea where pine cones came from, but had several really good-sized bruises from it. Blackberries and peaches were ripe then, so maybe something was hungry and it thought we were being too noisy too early. But it never saw anything from the tree line. Never saw anything. When I saw that thing on the hill and went into the cabin, my great-grandmother said something to the effect of boogers. Friends where we were stationed had me listen to the Bigfoot Outlaws that Matt was hosting back in 2015, and a person on that show was from the South and called them boogers. It was an instant flashback and blew my mind. Wow. Man, wow. Yeah, that's one thing that's kind of crazy about a story like that, is because
you saw something and your mind, immediately went to human. And to me, that is the most fascinating thing of like, if I saw something that was hairy in the woods and it had a human-like face, to me, that's kind of crazy. And like, I appreciate that story because, especially up there in Missouri and, that kind of wilderness country in the Ozarks. I've shared stories, of hearing people tell me stories when I was in the Ozarks. So, and to get the stuff thrown at you, and have that large concrete, or that large tree, basically being put in a place where like how can someone carry this tree in a matter of a couple hours? It would take a crane. But I appreciate you telling those stories. And we're going to move on to the next one. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate that story. All right, guys. Final story of the episode. So this person has shared multiple stories, and I have told one of their stories on the first part one of This Is Creepy. So go back and listen to that one. It has to deal with native medicine. So this is another story by this person. So all the paranormal made me really interested in religion and what all alternative things are out there. So in high school, I dabbled a little bit. I called a boyfriend back to me with medicine. I thought I was super in love with my first ever boyfriend. I heard about doctoring tobacco and blowing the smoke at him. I decided a medicine man is a human being just as much as I am a human being, so I gave it a go on my own. Non-denominational churches tell you that God is no respecter of persons. Also, that we are made in the image of God, who spoke creation into existence. So I decided I could speak and make something happen. So I did. Some weak version of my attempt. A particular flower that was in season in spring, where we like to hang out. Tobacco I had prayed over myself. I made my little offerings of tobacco to the spirits to help me. I don't remember what else I did, but I created a ritual with intention and smoked some of the tobacco I put out there and blew it where he lived. Nothing happened. I forgot about it. 10 years exactly go by, and he showed up in my life, pretty much out of nowhere. He was homeless. He had showed up back in town after leaving his wife. They broke up for some of the dumbest reasons I have ever heard in my entire life. I let him stay the night at my house, and I dropped him off at his friend's house the next day. He was missing one of his front two teeth, and he was just beat up and in bad shape. Lord, I felt so guilty that I sort of felt like I ruined his life. He had started staying at my house at this point, and I don't even know how it happened. He asked me to be his girlfriend. I don't know why I said yes, but I did. He was all moochy, and it literally drove me crazy. He was really a sad sack a character, and I really felt bad, like it was my fault. He made his decisions and everything, but my little spell slowly brought him back to the place where he would be with me. At least that was what I was thinking. He had stayed one night with friends, and it was like 2 a.m. I was awake, in the shower actually, and my son came on the door knocking to tell me that some guy was outside knocking on my bedroom window and freaking him out. So I tell him to go lay down, and I'll take care of him. I quickly throw on a towel, and go let him in. He walked all the way across town, drunk as a skunk. He cried all night in my lap over losing his wife and kids, which I totally deserved. But I had to get rid of him because I can't have drunk dudes showing up and scaring my kids. I guess that one is kind of bad, and I hurt him. But yeah, stupid decisions, young and dumb, and had ego. But I didn't know it could take years for medicine to work. Wow. I had to bring some heat with y'all. I know, that's one thing about that. And I appreciate this person, sharing this story with me, because one thing that's kind of, I think is, like people in this new, like I said, I mentioned New Age earlier. It's having a level of kind of respect for things that are not normal knowledge. But like I said, I know, that maybe this, story may offend some people, especially, I know when it comes to medicine and talking about it. But I believe that this story like this is one that needs to be told because it keeps someone else from doing that. And possibly, like I said,
possibly ruining someone's life by doing this to them. So I appreciate this person coming forward. Like I said, completely anonymous, but I appreciate that person telling the story anyways. So we come to the end of this episode. This is Creepy Part 2. There will be a Part 3. If you have a story that you would like for me to tell, please tell it. And like I said, you can be anonymous. Most people on this episode were anonymous because they wanted to be. I think one thing about telling your story and telling your truth, sometimes catching a little heat for that. And I know some people can make fun of you or whatever, but if you tell me your story, I will 100% believe you most of the time. I believe basically every story that was told and every story that's been told, because there's I have other stories to back that up and to make sense of your story. So if you have a story, and you're like, man, I really been wanting to tell this story, but like I don't want to do it, in front of everybody or have my name attached to it. Tell it anonymous, if I can say the word, anonymously, and I'll share it. I'll share that story, and share it to the best of my abilities. Much like the people that shared these stories on this episode, as they wrote this story out in great detail, and then I sometimes ask questions. It's just how I am. But I hope you guys enjoyed part 2 of this series. Like I said, it's one of my favorite. I think a lot of these stories, they brought the heat.
So my Spooklight story is one that happened over there in Tahlequah, over there by the sewer plant. I guess it was in high school sometime when we were just kind of hanging out the dirt road, a friend of mine, and we were parked there and noticed some lights came up from behind us, so thought we'd better move along. So we started the car up, took off a little bit, and noticed that there was no lights. So we kind of drove back further down the road, and same thing. So, as we started it up again, looked over to the left, and these lights were doing like the squiggly motion up in the trees, and figured it was time to get out. That's my Spooklight story. Well, one of them. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Dono. I'm from Ontario, Canada, and I'd like to share 2 creepy stories with you. Thank you to Yehola for asking me to send in some stories. So this was back in 2005. Me and my old friend, she wanted to take pictures of her baby, like in the fall leaves. So this was around, I think it was October. Yeah, it was around October anyways. And so we went down, and we were looking for places to take pictures, and I was looking around with the camera because I like to do photography as well. So I was looking, and this is where our powwow grounds are. So there is an arbor, and it's right in the middle of the park where we have our powwows. And I was looking through the camera, and I could see these like colors. They look like flags, like almost. I thought they were flags, so I looked, took the camera away, looked, there was nothing there. I put the camera back, and I could still see all these colors in the middle of that arbor. So I asked my friend to come over and take a look in the camera, and they could see it. And then I said, well, can you see it without it? And they said no. So I kept looking at it, and we'd take tried to take pictures of it, but they wouldn't register. But we did get a video of it. Unfortunately, we don't have the video anymore. I don't know what happened to it, if it was saved or not, but I haven't. I should ask for it and see. But anyways, I kind of moved around because there are like benches you can sit on. And they're metal, so I thought maybe it was like sun glare or something, but everywhere I'd move I'd see them, but they were right in the middle of the arbor. Looked like they were dancing. There was like pink, purple, yellow, green, blue, red, like all these colors, and they were all moving in a circle, clockwise direction, right in the middle of the arbor. So that was kind of creeped me out, but it was actually kind of nice as well. I wouldn't recommend doing that at a power ground, but we weren't looking for it, so I wouldn't do it again though. But yeah, so that's the first story. My second one is with the same friend. We used to like getting creeped out, and this was probably in the early 2000s. It was before she had her first baby anyways. So we were driving around. We used to like to go into cemeteries. Like there's ones you can drive around in Peterborough, Ontario. So that's in Canada as well. So we looked at this one and I didn't like it. I don't know, I got obviously a creepy feeling, but so we went down to this other one and you could drive through the paths, and it had just snowed a little bit, so there was like a fresh powder of snow. So we were driving along, and all of a sudden we seen these little footprints, and they're like, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 year old, like toddler footprints, and they look like, I don't know, like those old-fashioned white shoes, I guess you would call them. The ones with the laces, the flat soles, but there was a bunch of those little footprints. And then we went to this other direction, but there were all of these paths. I was gonna get out and take a picture, but no, it didn't do it. I was too creeped out. And anyways, sorry about that. Anyways, we were driving along, and then all of a sudden we see these little fingerprints, like little digging in the snow on some of these graves, and we're like, okay, we gotta get out of here. So we're trying to get out, and there's a bunch of different gates you can get out, but they were all locked. So unfortunately, we had to go through all of the cemetery, but it's our own fault for looking for a scare. But yeah, that we were young and pretty, we were just ignorant. We didn't think we would see anything, but we did. And those little fingerprints it was really sad actually to even see that, and those little footprints. Like there was no big footprints, like, you know, of a parent or somebody with their kid. And it was nighttime as well, so yeah, we seen that. And and those dancers in the powwow grounds is what I believe the first story was. But yeah, thank you for listening, and see you later.
Incy Wincy Spider went up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. So Incy Wincy Spider went up the spout again. Incy Wincy Spider went up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. So Incy Wincy Spider went up the spout again.
What's going on, guys, and welcome to the 36th rendition of the War Cry Podcast. I'm your host, and this episode is the third part of This Is Creepy. I appreciate everyone that sent their stories in. The first story that you just heard was from Dono. He hosts a podcast called Rest Scares. If you haven't had a chance, I've mentioned him on the live this past week, this past week, or weekend, whatever you want to call it. Go give him a follow. Go listen to his stories. I've mentioned him a few times on the pod, but he sent in 2 stories. And man, something about, you know, little kids in a cemetery, and, you know, you just, it creeps me out every time. But I appreciate him sending in those 2 stories, and let's get the show on the road. Alrighty, first story, and this is kind of multiple stories, and this gentleman would like to remain anonymous, if I can say it. But his stories go, so good day. I have some stories, quite a few actually. I could tell stories all night. There's some I heard growing up, and some I've experienced. I'm Cheyenne and Arapaho, and I'm from Oklahoma. but I currently live in Alberta, Canada. And I've had experiences with spirits and cryptids. My brother and I once seen a troll-like being. We seen it in our Grammy's house. The homes that she had lived in had spirits in them as well. So we pretty much grew up around that stuff. From hearing the voices to hearing things being moved around, seen people and heard a piano playing in an empty church. Got followed by ghost cars a few times at a house we lived in. I heard voices and music playing in the basement. It was just my daughters and I home at the time. They were sleeping and I was up. I just sat and listened to them until I went to sleep. My oldest daughter had seen the Hat Man and he had been bothering her for quite some time. He used to stand in the corner of her room and watch her sleep. When I was a small child, I remember having imaginary friends, but I think that they were spirits. Because my mom looked out the window and seen some kids playing on the swing set with me. When she went out to meet my friends, I was alone. She also said I was playing like there were other kids with me. When I used to work at Lucky Star Casino in Concho, yes, the same place that had the Bigfoot happenings, I have seen the pictures, and I have also seen the surveillance video. And yes, if you're wondering, it was huge. They say the tape was destroyed, but I know a few people who made copies for themselves. The tribe put a lid on the whole thing, but I know what happened. One time, I worked a double shift, and at around 5 in the morning, something big was seen just west of the casino. I heard a few whoops, and I waited until daylight to check out the area. There were buffalo in the field, so I waited a little bit longer for them to clear out, and when I went down to the area, there was a mulberry tree, and the buffalo laid underneath it. I checked around and seen that branches had been stripped of leaves and mulberries. And I'm talking about 10 to 12 feet off the ground. Now I'm about 6'2", and I couldn't reach those stripped branches. And I had heard some howls and whoops up there as well. We live in prime Bigfoot territory. Have yet to see one though. Seen a little handprint in the dust on my truck. I was told it was a raccoon, but there are none here. There's supposedly a village of LP along the river near our home. Just the other night, the wind chimed, and our front door chimed. The front door was shut. There was nobody in the living room and nobody in the house. I have so many other stories. I'm thinking of writing them down because as I get older, it's getting harder to remember them. As I do, it gives me something to do and helps me remember the best as I can of all the stuff I've heard and that I've experienced. Thank you for your time. Keep up the good work. I enjoy listening to the podcast, and have a good night, sir. You know, I appreciate that, man. There's so many different things that we deal with just as a native people, and he named literally every single thing that we kind of deal with and you know, things that we encounter. And you know, I just thought I appreciate this gentleman sharing the stories. He has a few other ones, and now this is kind of a question really, but he was talking about a road that's west of Anadarko called Caddo Road or Caddo Road, and he said that basically he's heard a lot of people say that there's something or someone out there, and they don't really talk about it in detail, but they always get freaked out, whatever it is. And if you're out in that Darko area, you know, let me know if you heard anything out there by Caddo Road. Caddo, jeez. You know, that's you know, another kind of story that he mentioned, that there was a Bigfoot that was roaming around outside of Riverside High School or Riverside Schools. That's just north of that casino, and he mentioned that people had seen or had similar stories, kind of to the one at the casino. And the final kind of thing that he talked about when we were having our conversation, that he believes that there are multiple witches that live out on certain roads, and I'm not going to name the roads, but he knew a guy that lived across the highway from one, and he said that her medicine was too strong. That's pretty interesting. I appreciate you, sir, for sharing those stories and also a little bit of information about that Concho area and that Bigfoot. I know people, man, that is like the topic. I've heard multiple people, and I've had now 4 people tell me that they have seen the video, and so I think it's out there still. Maybe one day I'll get to see it. But I appreciate you sending in those stories. Moving on to the next set of stories here. Now, these stories, I was told that they are with the utmost importance, and this, like I said, once again, anonymous. But this comes out of around my stomping grounds and around where I'm from and kind of the area. But this must remain anonymous. Please do not say my name or the name of the hospital, but it is a IHS hospital. My wife is My wife is a ICU nurse at this hospital. She works overnight. Often patients will talk about kids laughing and playing. They ask who these kids are, and the staff have to explain that there are no kids in the ICU. They will specifically describe a young boy, 8 to 9 years old, shorts with a button-up t-shirt and a classic hairstyle, like a young schoolboy. The patients that see the boy, they always pass away. Any patient that describes the boy dies soon after. They all describe the same boy. There's only been one nurse that has seen the boy, and they saw him going down the back stairwell late at night. As of right now, the nurse is still alive. The next story from this gentleman. My uncle was traveling a dirt road in an older car. It was a very rural area. As he topped a hill, the car suddenly died. The headlights were on, but they were very dim, as it was a 40s model, or at best a early 50s. Out of the thick brush on the left-hand side of the road, just in front of a car, a wolf-like head appeared. It was very large. As the wolf's head emerged from the brush, it slowly turned its head towards the car. Then the rest of the creature began to emerge. The shoulders started to appear, but they were not that of a wolf. They were shoulders of a man, and the beast was walking upright. As the rest of the beast made its way out of the bush, the head of the wolf, but the rest was human, and it was naked. It dropped to all fours and started slowly moving across the road. As it moved across the road, more and more of the creature started turning into a wolf. And by the time it was in the brush on the other side of the road, the transformation was almost complete. While it was crossing the car, it would not start. Once it was no longer in sight, the car started, and my uncle drove away as fast as possible. He said that the creature's medicine prevented the car from starting. And this story is out of Porham in Webbers Falls, Oklahoma. Man, I got goosebumps on that one. Golly. I got major goosebumps. Those are some great stories, and man, wow. I appreciate those stories. That's a lot of things that people don't really see hardly anymore. I know the internet is always saying, oh, there's a skinwalker on the side of the road. And, I have a hard time, believing this. But I appreciate those stories. Those are very powerful stories. And I've got goosebumps on both. Now, this story definitely hits close to home. This story comes from a family member of mine, and this is out of Merlehome Park in Tahlequah, or Park Hill. I was out at Merlehome Park, and there was about 4 or 5 of us in total. We were out at the park, And there's a parking lot that when you pull in, it's a kind of a parking lot with no spaces. It's just a big area that has a concrete area. And there's these two big trees. And this was real late at night. But we decided to climb these trees and mess around and doing what young people do. The cops get called. So 2 county cops show up and they're spotlighting the area. They get out and they're looking, and we're trying to be as quiet as humanly possible while they are talking and searching for us. They eventually leave. So we wait for a little bit. The coast is clear, everything is normal now. And we climb down. And we were sitting there talking. And all of a sudden, we hear this sound. And then a crash. Something threw a trash can. We all took off running, not looking back. But as we got closer to the Merle home, to the actual home, we all kind of sat there and wondered, what was that? These trash cans that are being spoke about are very heavy trash cans. And so that story was out of Merle home. You know, eventually I'm going to tell my Merle home story that I think it might be the same creature. And I asked my family member what they thought it was, and, you know, kind of hindsight, and they think it was probably Bigfoot or, you know, some type of being that is there, that lives there. But I appreciate my family member for sharing that story. These next set of stories, I got a message from Mr. Jared Davis. He cooks the best hog meat in Cherokee County. I would say probably up there in Oklahoma, probably top 3 maybe. Got to give him his props. But he sent me a message and he said, "Man, you didn't even tell all my good stories." So these stories are from Mr. Jared Davis. He's out of Locust Grove area. But here's his stories. When we were young, we used to play hide and seek in our neighborhood. And we would break up into teams. Well, one night, we couldn't find our friends at all. So we just went home, and we got our pit bulls, and we went out to look again. And as we were walking down the dirt road, we heard something running at us, and our dogs started to bark in that direction. And the next thing we see is our friends running towards us. Keep in mind, it is a dirt road. And one of them had taken their shoes off and was running barefoot at a full sprint down this road. We seen the fright on their faces. And we asked, "What is it? What is it?" They said, "Let's go back home. We got to get back." And when we got home, they said they seen a woman in an old Western style dress coming towards them. And she was floating about 3 feet off the ground with what looked like to be a book in her hand. And she was reading. One night, when I was a younger man, a younger guy, we were coming back from a revival in Tahlequah, on Highway 82 north of Tahlequah. We were with our grandparents in an old station wagon by Blackbird Creek Bridge. My grandparents were talking Cherokee to each other, and the tone got a little bit different. And as a young guy, I noticed, so I stopped playing, with what I was doing, and looked ahead and noticed a small creature that resembled a golem on the rail next to in the road, like one of those Lord of the Rings type golems. And for a vivid second, it jumped off the rail into wherever the bridge passed over. The bridge was 20 feet high. The thing we saw was never spoken of again, but I can recall that day and the sight of it to this very day. My uncle told one of his uncles as a child about him sitting in their old house by a spring where LP would gather water. He would say that one day he just happened to look out the window and seen an LP sitting by the water, motioning him to come and speaking to him in Cherokee. as if he were standing right there in front of him. He could hear him, plain as day. So he climbs out the window and goes towards the LP. And as he got closer, he noticed that he was further into the woods, but was still telling him to come on and follow him. He said this happened a few times until they came to a solid rock wall on a hillside, and the LP turns and faces the wall and spoke to it, and the wall split apart, and the LP walks in and tells him to come in. When inside, he noticed a whole family of them. The LP told him to sit as he went for the chair, and he noticed that the seating part was all copperheads. And the LP said, "Sit, they won't hurt you." He said they sit and they talked for a while, and the LP told him that he should probably get home and to not speak about what he's seen. And for a number of years, he didn't say anything. It was a long time before he said anything, because if he did, bad things would happen. The LP then walked him back to the rock, repeated the phrase from earlier, and the rock slid open again, and they said their goodbyes. And I think, if I recall correctly, when he returned home, it was 1 or 2 days later from when he first left. My brother said that he had seen one watching us play Cherokee marbles in our front yard. We had 2 light sources from our front porch, and there was a light on the pole. We would play just about every night, as it is a game that I still love to play to this day. We had been playing for quite some time, and my little brother's marble got hid away, and as he was walking towards it, all of a sudden came running back in fright. Couldn't say what it was as he was running back to the house, but we could see the fright on his face, so we ran behind him to get in the house. When asked, he wouldn't say what it was that he seen, until some time later, when he said that he saw a little man and he was peeking around a tree watching us play marbles. Wow. Yeah, Mr. Jared Davis got those LP stories on lock, and I appreciate him sharing, these stories, because man, I mean, these are some. I got some goosebumps, man. I definitely got some goosebumps on those, and I appreciate him sharing those stories. He's got one more that I'm gonna save for a later date. It's about him and him growing up in this creepy house. But Jared, I appreciate you sharing those stories, and keep them coming, man. I appreciate you. Man, guys, if you guys aren't spooked out by some of these, geez, if I can talk. If you guys are not spooked out by these stories yet, I got one coming. I got one of these coming from Haskell University, and it comes from Miss Chastity Cadu, and she is Potawatomi from the Prairie Band Potawatomi Reservation in Kansas. And her story is, back in 2005, I began the fall semester at Haskell Indian Nations University in Lawrence, Kansas. The girls' freshman dorm is called Pocahontas Hall, better known as Pokey. There are many stories I have heard from Pokey. People would say that this dorm is the most haunted dorm of all dorms at Haskell, and everyone had a story about it. One day, I came back to my dorm room, which was a large dorm room located in the back right wing of the dorms. Supper was over, and everybody was winding down. My roommate and I had an extra bed in our room where our friends would sometimes crash when they would come to visit us. I laid on this bed and began to watch a movie with my roommate. All of a sudden, my body felt stiff. My chest felt heavy. And it felt like someone was pressing down on my body. I could not move, I could not turn my head, and I couldn't even speak. All I could do was lay there and try to scream, but I couldn't. This went on for 10 minutes, and I finally felt the pressure off my chest, and I sat up and turned to my roommate, and she had no idea of what was happening to me or the state that I was in. She looked confused as I sat there and cried. The day I knew there were spirits in that Pocahontas Hall, so my coworkers and I decided to smudge our room and be careful with who we invited over. Another time, while dorming at the OK Hall, during the summer. My roommate and I were asleep one night and heard a ball bouncing in our room. We turned the light on and we see her basketball in the middle of our room, which was crazy because she kept it in the closet with the doors closed. The next day we told our dorm matrons about it, and they told us a story how Haskell used to be a boarding school back in 1884, and many native children perished here, leaving behind their tiny spirits. There is even a cemetery on campus where children are buried. She said that they love playing with toys and to keep our things put away and not to bring it with us and keep it at home. That night, we heard no noises, but the next morning, my roommate and I woke up to our stuffed toys and other things, or other items, in a small circle on the floor. We had to smudge our room shortly after that. Wow. Man, yeah, I know we just talked about, in the last live stream, I went into a more detailed talk about boarding schools and residential schools, and this story is fitting. It's just crazy, the amount of energy that could be in a place, that has had young children, perish, and killed, and whatnot, and I appreciate you sharing those two stories. Haskell has been notoriously known for being maybe the most haunted college ever. I may say it's up there top 3, but there's a lot of stuff going on out there. And I appreciate you sharing, Chastity, I appreciate you sharing that story, and let's get on to the next one. And now this will be the last story for This Is Creepy Part 3. And it's a good one. My name is Hawk John, and I am Kushata from Kinder, Louisiana. And this story is from when I was a kid. Now I'll give you a little background info that will help you understand some details. My parents were married at one time, but got divorced when I was a baby. My parents were two very different people, raised two very different ways. My dad was extremely 1,000% traditional in the native ways of his upbringing, of my brother and I. The language, the do's and don'ts. My mom's family was raised 1,000% very strictly Christian. The talking in tongues, the girls with long hair, no makeup, dress wearing, holy rolling kind of people. They were so strict and they didn't celebrate holidays. So when the holidays would come, we would go to Texas to our grandparents on our dad's side, and so would the rest of our family. So when it was time for us to go to Texas for the holidays, sometimes my mom would meet my grandparents or my uncle at this truck stop on the border of Texas and Louisiana that sold food, and it was in Maryville, Louisiana. It had pizzas, burgers, those types of truck stops. So one time, going home from Christmas/New Year's holiday from Texas, my uncle had me and my brother and my cousins, and we stopped at the Maryville truck stop to get food. Nobody was meeting us. He was just taking us the full trip all the way home. We got food, and I noticed that he got a little bit extra. The food part wasn't too noticeable, but I noticed that he got an extra drink, and that he kept it safe, like he didn't want anything to happen to it. Now I think the highway is Highway 110 between Maryville, and I think the next town would be Singer in Louisiana, just across the border. It's a straight shot. Very smooth road, no bumps, no hard turns, no potholes, really anything. But there is a tiny little bridge that's about 10 to 15 foot long, covering a dried up creek bed. And as we got closer to it, we slowed down, and he pulled over. And he stopped right before the crossing, and my uncle grabbed the food and the drink, and he set it at a small cross next to the road. He said a couple of things and got back and put his seatbelt on and started driving like nothing happened. Of course, us being young guys, young kids, we were scratching our heads and was like, why did he do that? What is he doing? And we were always taught not to question something like that. but I had to know, and was the only one who had enough courage. So I asked him, "Why did you do that?" He paused and he said, "I'll tell you when we park." So later on, we get back to my mom's. He comes in and visits with her, my stepdad, and us for a while. He gets up to leave and he helps us get our suitcases and stuff and started telling us bye and that he loved us. And I said, "Hey, you remember earlier you said you would tell me why you left that food on the side of the road when we parked?" He paused and he goes, "Okay. Last holiday, when guys were off to school, or when you guys were off of school, I was on my way down here to come get y'all, and I was driving by that spot, and there was a man sitting there on the ground. It was really, really cold outside that day, and it was raining, and he was soaked from head to toe with his head down, and he didn't look as I passed. As soon as I passed, something did not feel right, and I kept feeling like I should have at least stopped and talked to him and give him some food or a blanket or something to help him out, but I didn't. So I just kept going so I could pick y'all up and bring y'all back to Texas. So when the holiday was over, I brought you guys back. I brought you guys back, and I was headed back. And I had some leftover food from the truck stop in Maryville that I had sitting on the dashboard. And I put my drink carrier with my drink, up there. And I was coming up to that spot. It was quiet. I had no music on, nothing. I was just driving. And straight out of nowhere, that food, along with the drink and the towel, flew and slammed into the passenger side window with force. It didn't slip off or fall straight down like it normally would. It was as if someone grabbed the towel and pulled it hard, and it was like it was coming straight into the window. And the drink hit so hard that it exploded. The lid fell off, popped off, splashed all over the place. And I slammed my brakes and stopped because it made me jump. I knew what happened wasn't normal. Then I realized where I was and remembered the man sitting there cold and wet with his head down, and realized that was the exact same spot that I had seen him. And there was a cross there that wasn't there before. I took it as a spirit of that man. He was upset with me because I didn't stop that day. So every time I passed by, I stopped. I drop off some food, even a towel sometimes, as a way of saying sorry to that man for not stopping and leaving a gift there for him. And every time from that then on, until my grandpa passed away and my grandmother and uncle moved away from that part of Texas, he did the same thing. Always stopped and left some food and a drink, and sometimes even a towel. I even remember him leaving a blanket once. Man, that's so crazy. I wonder if, it's like residual energy, and that, like I said, I mentioned before with the Haskell stories. It's so crazy that there's things out there that we can't see, and they're always around us, and they're always enveloped. There's always something that pushes it forward and makes things move, and gives us, like I said, life, and it's crazy, that sometimes science and them kind of just disregard, things we can't explain, and I appreciate that story, and like I said, these stories have been so these were some heavy hitters. Like I really sat back when I was reading some of these stories and really thought about different things, and I mentioned on the live stream that I often think about what it would be like if we know the kids that had perished from residential schools, or for instance in this last story, if he had stopped by and helped that man out, things could be different. And that's a what if game that I often think, and that's just kind of my way of my mind racing and thinking about those things, like what if I did this, or what if this had turned out differently, how would my life be? And I appreciate everyone that shares stories with me. I do have I'm getting geared up for This Is Creepy 4, but these are some bangers. These are some great stories. And I appreciate everyone that has shared. And if you would like to share your story, there's multiple ways you can do it. You have realwarcrypod@gmail.com. There is Yehola Tiger Facebook. You can message me on there. I have more stories from certain people. I just didn't want to overload and then me share basically 30 stories from somebody or have a conversation. But one thing I love when people message me is I always ask them what their favorite, and then we get into certain conversations and they start telling me things of like, oh, this happened over here and this was weird. And so I appreciate everyone that I have those conversations with, and sometimes it's I kind of get not like hard for me to reply, but sometimes I just get busy in my life and I get to, I can't get to you, but I appreciate those people that reach out. And so without further ado, guys, this is Creepy Part 3, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Welcome to This is Creepy Part 4. On this episode, you are going to get some of the scariest, creepiest, and spine-tingling tales from a res near you. Enjoy.
My uncle told me about an elder whom was sick and basically on their deathbed. And as the family and friends came to visit this elder before the passing, and most native families and relatives and people that, friends, they do go pay their respects to that dying relative or friend or, someone close to the family. My uncle said that it was getting really, really late, and they had to walk home before it got too dark. And as they were walking through the woods, they came upon a really sick-looking dog. And they thought this dog was trying to go off and, pass away by itself. But they kind of looked over towards the dog, and they realized that the dog was just standing there. It was just standing there all sick-looking and staring at them, on their path home. They tried to chase it away, but nothing. The dog wouldn't even move out of their path. And the next thing they thought was, let's throw some rocks at this really sick dog to get it out of the way. And as they were throwing the rocks, eventually a rock hit the dog in the face. The dog finally reacted, and it slowly crept away into the night. The next day, they went back to visit the passing elder, and everyone had noticed this huge cut on the face of that elder. The cut was very unexplainable to the family, but the boys knew they threw that rock at the sickly dog. And they waited until the eventual passing of this elder. And after the elder passed, they began to tell everybody about the event of throwing this rock and hitting this dog in the face, and everyone was shocked. One night we were playing with a Ouija board on the porch of our house, and our dog began barking towards the road. And I asked the Ouija board, what was it that my dog was barking at? And the board said, evil. I asked the board, what do you mean? And the board said that there were spirits watching us, but wouldn't come near because your dog was a guardian. Along with me and my brother having a guardian spirit that followed us, I asked the board why they were following us, and the board replied that I reminded the female spirit of her boyfriend, and my brother had a guy that followed him that reminded him of his son. It was freaky because we were the only ones that had guardian spirits that followed us. I don't know to this day if the spirits went on or if they still follow us. And I do not plan on playing with the Ouija board again.
So my spooky story takes place at the Muskogee County Courthouse in Muskogee, Oklahoma. It's in the middle of the day. I was in there doing some business and had to go to the bathroom, so I went to the bathroom to just taking care of my business, and I heard somebody kind of walking fast going out, behind me, and had the clickety shoes like a lawyer might have, dress shoes, whatever, and they stopped, and I kind of looked and thought maybe somebody knew me or something, and there was nobody there. So when I got done, I looked, and there was nobody in the stalls. The door never opened. There was nobody in there. I wasn't spooked out or anything. It's just something that happened.
When we were younger, my mother had went out with some of her friends, and my older brother was left to watch me and my younger brother. And it was getting really late, and he had told us to go to bed, but we had asked if we could sleep in our mom's bed, and he said, "Oh, okay." We go to sleep. In our old Indian 4-bedroom house, my brother slept in the middle room. And as we all were in bed for a few minutes, me and my brother were giggling and acting up in the bed for a few minutes. And my older brother comes in mad at us and tells us to go to bed. We lay there for a few minutes still kind of acting up, but not as bad as we were before. My brother comes in griping at us and tells us to stay in bed, and we reply to him, we were in bed. And he goes back to his room, and he was still pretty mad. As we lay in bed, the trembling shake hits the bed, and the bed is shaking. And all of a sudden it stopped. My brother comes into the room. He's pissed. He starts griping us out again and again and again, as he had all night long. We tell him what just happened, and he looked at us in a daze, and he sees that we're telling the truth. And we go into the living room, and that's where we slept that night. My grandpa said that him and his siblings were playing hide and go seek in the woods. And they would only play so far into the woods, but they'd always test those boundaries. He said he climbed up in a tree, and nobody was coming to find him. And as he sat in that tree, he heard steps coming from the other side of the tree. He said he tucked in as close as he could so he couldn't be seen in the tree. Then all of a sudden he hears something getting closer. And he didn't recognize the voices, but they were speaking in Cherokee and telling the others to hurry up because they were going to be late. He sits as still as he possibly could in the tree, and as the voices got pretty much underneath the tree, he looked down and he saw 3 LP walking past. And he sat for some time to let them pass further on. He climbed down the tree and he ran home to go find his siblings, and all his siblings were at home waiting for him. Black Panthers in Oklahoma, they are absolutely real, and I have seen one myself up close and personal in Cole County, Oklahoma. Cole County is located in the southeast part of Oklahoma. It's about 30 minutes south of Ada and north of Atoka. In 1998, I was driving home, and one of these big beasts walked out in front of my car. Its face and its body were slightly bigger and wider than a normal mountain lion. It had solid black, absolutely no spots. Black panthers are seen all over the place in Oklahoma. I was about 7 years old, and I was in Zoltan, near Carnegie, Oklahoma. We just got off the bus at our cousin's house after Bible school. We live about a mile from home. My sister and me getting ready to walk home. When we got on the road, on the right side of the road of this bridge, he was laying in the middle of the road like just a normal cat, wiggling his tail. We ran back and told my uncle. He didn't believe us, so we wanted to get home so we could walk again to the road by the bridge, and he was gone. My sister and I took off our shoes to run past the bridge. I ran as fast as I could. I got up the hill. My sister was still on the other side, so I had to run back and get her, and that was the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. We could have died. Another time, our dogs were barking, and we look outside, and this black panther was walking right by our house. The dogs didn't even scare it. My uncle used to feed Sasquatch. He would just put food out for them all the time, and he always said there was at least a couple families of them. I'm not quite sure if anyone continued to feed them because my uncle passed away. There were people that would see them during the powwows. Some said that it sounded like they were trying to sing along. My dad got to see one once at a powwow. They were cleaning the grounds, and one was watching them from the tree line. Unfortunately, I have only have ever got to see one through night vision goggles, so I couldn't really see them too good through that, but I've seen the eye reflection. I've also had spirit experiences and an apparition, and also heard children's voices before. My family and I currently live on a reserve in Canada, and there have been sightings around here for a long time of multiple different entities and beings. I heard some vocalizations last summer. Only way I could describe the sound was it sounded like a gorilla or an ape trying to imitate an owl. And we also aren't far from another reserve where there's also been sightings. That one is a lot closer to the mountains, and Jasper isn't far as well. You know that guy that recorded the giant on top of the hill and then posted it to TikTok that went viral? And then they also, found out that he died later on. I watched the video of him, he said that it was basically a hoax. His behavior was weird to me. But that town is where he shot that video. And that's in Jasper, Canada. I read and watch a lot of paranormal and cryptic articles and videos, and have just recently started learning and listening to podcasts. I started learning about things here in Canada, the haunted places, the cryptids, the entities and the beings that inhabit these forests and these lands. There's a lot of mountains and a lot of forests, and I had learned that there are centaurs up here. There's another reserve a couple hours from me that it supposedly has centaurs there. A while back, one broke into the school and did a lot of damage. They said that there were surveillance videos and footage, but the band, council, and the police took the footage. Imagine seeing an actual centaur. I was speaking to a friend a little bit ago about them when we were at a funeral. We were swapping stories, and I asked him about centaurs because he grew up on that reserve. And he said that there are herds of them, but they're always hiding. He was told different things about them, though. One of them is they are a beautiful native person that has a horse body. Another one is that they are scary creatures with horses for bodies, and they are like monsters. The other one is that they look like beautiful native people, but when you get close to them, they actually turn into monsters. I really think the centaurs are the things that I want to learn more about. My wife's aunt has told us that there are sightings of centaurs near our home. I don't know when, but I sometimes sit out at night hoping to hear or see something. I have a few stories that I'd like to share. A quick one. Now, I know that I'm not supposed to be eating outside at night or eat in the dark. So it's a habit. It's ingrained in me. So with that being said, my mom and I had gone to a meeting one night at one of the tribal buildings. We had brought food but left it in the car. So we didn't know if we could bring it or if they were serving food, but we just left it in the car to be safe. When the meeting was over, my mom and I jumped in the car and I turned on the little dome light in the car and we tore that food up, man. We was starving. I'm eating my food and I continue to turn on my brights and my mom makes the comment, "Don't you know that that's the cemetery back there?" Now, granted, I did know. I just wanted to see if I could see something. Anyways, we finish our food and we leave. A couple nights later, we return to the same place for another meeting. I parked facing the highway, opposite of the cemetery, and we do the same thing. We're grubbing, we're eating, we're starving. But this time we were parked under a street light, so I didn't bother turning on my dome light. As soon as I was done with my food, I felt the whole car shake. It felt like somebody was up behind the car and started moving the car. At first I thought it was my brother-in-law trying to be funny. I turned around and there was no one there. I also thought, why would he be doing that knowing that my mom was in the car? We were parked by a big truck and I thought maybe, the person was getting into their truck. I was trying to find logical reasons as to why my whole car shook. My mom was looking at me all crazy, asking me what I was doing. She apparently didn't feel the car shake, so then she finishes her food and she reminds me of the cemetery and told me that my grandpa was buried back there. And then she said, it was just the wind. What was I, it's just nothing. But what I thought it was my grandpa. He was mad because we didn't share our food. I have never had anything happen to me like that. But then again, I never eat outside in the dark, and I never eat in the dark. I was always told, if you were to eat in the dark, to throw your food out, but don't watch where it goes. My son and I took a very last-minute trip from Oklahoma to Louisiana. At the time, he was about 3. Our trip was a little longer than I had expected, especially with a small child. And by midnight, we were still on the road. We were somewhere in Texas. My GPS said that we still had about 3 hours to go. And I had about a half tank of gas left. And I was trying to tell myself the next brightly lit gas station, I'm going to get out and get some gas and get back on the road. Well, as soon as I thought that, a brightly lit gas station appears. I got some gas and we get back on the road. The lights from the small town started to fade away and my 3-year-old child says, "Who is that, Mommy?" He had his tablet, he had some books, and he had toys in the back. So my first thought was maybe he was, looking at something in the book or on the tablet. I asked him where, and he says, "In the seat next to you." Again, it's just the two of us in the car. Knowing this, I moved my eyes to look in the seat next to me, and of course I didn't see anything. I kind of get scared, mainly feeling shocked. I didn't know what to say to him, so I decided to ask, "What do they look like?" And he takes a while, and it looks like he's really studying, looking at somebody in the seat next to me. He finally says, just like a man. And it was relief to me. And I just told my son, it's probably someone who needs a ride, and they'll get out when we reach their destination. I didn't feel threatened or anything like that, but it was something, or that it was anything bad. I just said a little prayer to whatever was with us, that we take them where he needs to go, and as long as he allows us to get where we are going. And about an hour later, we reached Shreveport, and it was busy and bright, and I had the courage to ask my son about the passenger. He looked and said, "No, he's gone." I kept that story to myself for a long time. I always had a feeling that my son could see spirits or that they are around him. But this trip confirmed it. My sixth sense was very much heightened when I was pregnant with him. I don't know what it means for him or me. He told my mom that he sees stuff this past summer. My mom is one of those old school Indians that we don't talk about this stuff and, we just keep it moving. So hearing that from her grandson, she was in a great deal of disbelief. I think she automatically thought that we were all seeing demons. She sounded the alarms, and had my uncles come over, which, man. Anyways, my son's brain processes things differently, and we have been on a path to help him. I've started to wonder if this has anything to do with why he's able to see things. I don't know if the two are related, but, it is very interesting. He really told my mom, I used to see them more when I was younger. My son is only 10. This story was from a long, long time ago. There was a lot of clear cutting happening out in Salisal, Oklahoma. They were putting in power and telephone lines, and a work crew was on the road, working. And they seen that what they thought was a down power line, laying across the road. Well, they went out, they got out, went down, and all of a sudden it started moving. It was one of those giant snakes making its way. My wife told me a story about seeing a dog man when she was a little girl. My wife and her sister were playing around in their Grammy's old house. It was abandoned and nobody lived in it. But there was a lot of stuff in there left over, and they went looking for clothes for their dolls. When they were looking through the clothes and all the various things in this room, they just happened to look over, and there was this creature standing in the corner of the room. It stood up. My wife described it as eyes red as fire, and it was looking right at them. She said that they were so scared that they froze, and they were so frozen it felt like an eternity. But it was really only after a couple of seconds. Her sister grabbed her, and they ran away. And she said that he walked out on the porch and watched them run away. Wow, man. Some pretty keen stories that came out for this edition of the part 4 of This Is Creepy. And I appreciate everyone that has shared those stories. I try not to give a lot of, I guess you say, personal information, people's names and things like that. But I do think it's very important to do list those sites, kind of, locations. Because there's could be someone out there who's dealing with something, and, they want to share their story, but they don't know how or who to. But, I always appreciate people that come and, share their story. I know sometimes some stories are tough to tell. Especially like, the story that was about the woman's son. She never told that story to anybody. And so I appreciate people that do that, and getting their story out. Because, just never know. Someone else could be dealing with it too as well. And like I said, I can't, thank the people that have shared stories enough. But this is Creepy Part 4. Let me know what you guys think on Spotify. I'll do a poll, or I'll ask a question, what's your favorite, story of this, of this rendition, I guess you could say. But one thing I want to make an announcement of is the Warcry podcast. After you hear this episode, I'm going on a hiatus for about 2 weeks. You're not going to hear anything from me. I'm, trying to take a break from the podcast a little bit. You've been pounding out a bunch of episodes and a lot of content. But the year anniversary of the podcast is November 13th of this year. And so I want to do something fun. I got one interview lined up right now from a recurring guest who's been on before. I'm going to look to get someone out of Cherokee Nation Res. I need to get a hold of them. You see if I can get them on. And then I'm going to do a compilation. Basically, we're just going to run it straight through of all the This Is Creepies. Get you an hour or something of content on the 13th. Letting you hear an hour and something worth of of stories. True stories that people have shared. And if you have a story and you want to be on This Is Creepy Part 5, now I'm going to put this out way ahead of time. This Is Creepy Part 5 is coming out New Year's Day. Okay? So you got from here all the way to New Year's Day to get your stories in if you want to hear them. One thing too that I love about This Is Creepy is a lot of native our native culture is oral history, and to be able to record that, and yeah, it's me telling the story, but it's your story that you're sharing. That you could say years from now, you're old, like especially if you're young, someone like me who's younger, and you're sharing those stories, and your grandkids will say, "Hey, pop this podcast in real quick," and they can listen to it, and it's your story. It's just coming from my voice. But like I said, get your stories in. This is Creepy Part 5, New Year's Day. And then after New Year's, we'll see what happens.